Coming up on The World Today, the UK government announces more planned reopenings as the country emerges from weeks of COVID-19 lockdown. A second German area is put under lockdown following a spike in COVID-19 cases. Plus, Malawians head to the polls again to either elect a new president or allow Peter Mutharika a second term. Hello to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Akaite Afia. We began the program in Germany as the government reimposes lockdown restrictions in 2 districts in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia after a spike in COVID-19 cases. In one of those areas, 1,500 workers at a meatpacking plant tested positive for coronavirus. Authorities are saying these preventive measures could last up until the end of June. And it's the first time lockdowns would have been reintroduced in Germany since the country began lifting nationwide restrictions in May. Meanwhile, the rest of the world continues to deal with COVID-19.
In Germany, authorities are reinstating local lockdown measures in North Rhine-Westphalia following an outbreak in a meatpacking plant with 1,553 workers testing positive for the coronavirus. This is the country's largest outbreak since lifting its lockdown in May. Germany currently has a total of 192,127 cases with a death toll of 8,909.
Good luck tomorrow. Are you ready? Are you braced?
In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to announce pubs, cinemas and galleries to officially reopen from July 4. Ministers are still considering having customers register when entering pubs and bars so they can easily be tracked down if they come into contact with an infected person. The UK has recorded 306,761 cases and a death toll of 42,731. Over in the United States, the death toll has surpassed 120,000, while the total cases tops 2.3 million. New infections have been spiking in several U.S. states, with Florida being the 7th state to reach the 100,000 case mark. Florida has encouraged citizens to wear face masks, while Texas fears it could be forced to close again. In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia says it will allow roughly 1,000 residents of the region to participate in the Islamic pilgrimage known as Hajj this year in an attempt to curb the spread of the coronavirus. An estimated 2 million people would have normally visited Mecca otherwise, and many feared it will be cancelled altogether. In South Africa, about 180 students have tested positive for the coronavirus after the country began reopening schools. Officials say contact tracing and testing is underway after a school in the Eastern Cape region has been closed for decontamination. The South African Democratic Teachers Union has called for the closure of schools in the area, with more than 300 fatalities in the region. The neighboring Western Cape province has recorded 1,500 out of the country's 1,990 total deaths.
Well, let's take a look at Brazil, which has become the second country after the United States to announce death tolls from COVID-19 above 50,000. A judge has ordered the president to wear a protective mask when in public spaces in the capital, Brasilia, and in the surrounding federal district. President Jair Bolsonaro has been criticized for belittling the risk posed by the coronavirus, which he dismissed as a little cold at the start of the pandemic. He has also been appearing in public without a mask while greeting his supporters without social distancing. A look at other countries in Latin America, an upcoming epicenter of the coronavirus. The death toll in Mexico rose to 22,500 after 759 people died in 24 hours up to Monday evening. And Peru, which has the second highest number of cases in Latin America after Brazil, registered its lowest number of new cases in 42 days. Let's switch over to the UK and continuing following that story, where earlier today, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced pubs, restaurants, and hotels will reopen in England early next month as social distancing restrictions relax from 2 meters to 1, providing mitigations where in place. Britain's economy has been severely affected by the lockdown imposed to curb the spread of COVID-19. While non-essential retailers were allowed to reopen last week, many businesses, particularly in the hospitality and leisure sectors, have remained closed. The changes will allow 2 households to meet in any setting. Hairdressers can reopen along with places of worship, most leisure facilities, and tourist attractions such as theme parks. However, nightclubs, indoor gyms, and swimming pools will stay closed. Johnson said that whilst there was currently no risk of a second peak of infections that could overwhelm the health service, there would continue to be flare-ups of the virus, but added that they will not hesitate to reinstate restrictions if need be. Britain has one of the highest death tolls in the world from COVID-19, but the number of cases has been steadily falling in recent weeks. Our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, joins us now. Juliana, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
So Prime Minister Johnson has been receiving increased pressure from businesses as a result of the harsh effects that the pandemic has had on the economy. Is this move to further reopen what's best for the public, businesses, or if possible, both?
It's definitely a little bit of both. I think there was humongous pressure on the Prime Minister to reduce the 2-meter social distancing rule, which he has, but he hasn't exactly called it 1 meter. It's called 1 meter plus. This was pressure from business lobby groups and also his own MPs who believed it was going to be completely impossible for the hospitality sector to open successfully if they had to do so under 2 meters. So if you're thinking of a typical restaurant, perhaps if there were 100 tables, this would be reduced to about 30 or 40. And of course, we can't forget that Britain is a service-based economy. Almost 80% of its GDP is relied upon by the services. So this is your bars, your clubs, your restaurants. And of course, since the shutdown in March, they have completely hammered the economy. Just last month, GDP shrunk by 20.4%. And it was believed that it was time. Britain went into lockdown much later than its European counterparts. So of course, it's emerging from lockdown much later, and there was pressure. And of course, as you said, Britain is still the 3rd highest country with a bad COVID death toll. So that's still in the back of people's minds. So Prime Minister Boris Johnson was very, very careful with his words today. Just right now, as I'm talking to you, he is still delivering part of this daily coronavirus briefing, which he has announced will no longer be taking place during the day. And again, he is being very careful. Health takes priority, but of course, a lot of people are affected, their healths are affected, not by COVID-19, but just if they're locked down for much further, because that has a detrimental impact on their pockets.
Definitely. And Juliana, let's take a moment to just listen to what the Prime Minister has been saying, or what he did say earlier today.
Mr. Speaker, given the significant fall in the prevalence of the virus, we can change the 2-meter social distancing rule from the 4th of July. Where it is possible to keep 2 meters apart, people should. But where it is not, we will advise people to keep a social distance of 1 meter plus, meaning they should remain 1 meter apart while taking mitigations to reduce the risk of transmission. Mr. Speaker, I can tell the House that we will also reopen restaurants and pubs. Hallelujah! All hospitality indoors will be limited to table service. As eagerly awaited as a pint will be a haircut, completely by me, Mr. Speaker, and so we will reopen hairdressers with appropriate precautions, including the use of visors. We also intend to allow some other close contact services, such as nail bars, to reopen as soon as we can. Administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern...
Hearing some of those hallelujahs, it's clear that everyone is excited about the reopening of these businesses. And I know the Prime Minister also mentions that most leisure facilities will reopen if they can do so safely. So what safety procedures will likely be put in place to make this possible?
No leisure facilities will be open. That's been made clear. They won't be open until at least the middle of July. That was asked during the Prime Minister's comments at the dispatch box, which you've just been playing. And that was also referenced by Oliver Dowden, who is the MP in charge of culture. What we're expecting is that gyms and leisure facilities, including water parks and swimming pools, will perhaps be open by mid-July. So that will be the final phase, so to speak. And that includes also nail salons.
Okay. I mean, and the UK has been under lockdown since March 23rd, but with the recent easing of lockdown measures, the number of people out is steadily increasing. So how comfortable are the people in the UK with this new level of reopening?
You know, I would say it's the same with how it would be anywhere across the world. I think it's normal for people to be out. It's normal for people to want to engage with one another. Just last week, Monday, non-essential stores were reopened. Our studio is right in the dead centre of London. And I've got to say, I was shocked, you know, going out for a coffee to see so many people out. Many people were out. Many of them were not wearing masks. Many, you know, queuing up to go into Selfridges or Nighttown or any of the other stores were not adhering to the social distancing rules. So even though I think Britain has been dubbed the most coronaphobia nation in the world, I believe people are, you know, they are happy to go out. I think since there were a couple of senior government figures who were caught flouting the rules, Britons decided to take it upon themselves to use their own wisdom. So people are trying where they can to maintain that 2-meter social distancing rule. But as I'm sure you know, and many of our viewers in Britain or who know Britain know, you know, they do love a drink in the pub. So as we heard somebody in the chambers shouting hallelujah, I think there'll be rounds of hallelujah tonight, and it'll be interesting to see just how many people are flouting and going out on the 4th of July when things are finally starting to get back to normal.
Definitely. Well, thanks again for joining us today, Juliana.
Thank you.
And in the United States, the public was given the opportunity to pay their respects to RAYSHARD Brooks, the African-American man who was shot by a police officer as he ran away with a police taser outside a Wendy's restaurant in Atlanta. The memorial took place at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church on Monday. His widow, Tamika Miller, was seen outside the church dressed in a white dress with a picture of she and RAYSHARD printed on it. Mourners also stood around wearing masks and t-shirts with a photo of Brooks or reading Black Lives Matter. Today, a private funeral holds for RAYSHARD Brooks, and with the church's website live streaming the event. His death 2 weeks ago comes on the heels of the killing of George Floyd while in the custody of Minneapolis police, and which intensified national outrage over police brutality and racism in the American justice system. The police officer who shot Brooks, 27-year-old Garrett Rolfe, has been fired and charged with murder. A second officer, 26-year-old Devin Brosnan, has been placed on administrative duty and charged with aggravated assault. Meanwhile, those anti-racism protests have continued in the United States on Monday. This happened when protesters tried to tear down a statue of former President Andrew Jackson near the White House, scrawling "Killer Scrum" on the base and pulling at ropes around the figure of Jackson on a horse. The police eventually intervened. Video posted on social media also showed demonstrators climbing on the bronze monument in Lafayette Square across the street from the White House in the latest bid to destroy images of historical figures considered racist or divisive. Police in riot gear are then seen moving in to drive the crowd back and form a protective ring around the statue, which was erected in 1852 on a white marble base and depicts Jackson astride a rearing horse. Earlier, protesters clashed with police in the nearby streets, the latest in a string of demonstrations against police brutality and racism following the death of 46-year-old black man George Floyd under the knee of a Minneapolis police officer. America's 7th president, Andrew Jackson, was a former general in the U.S. Army and a populist politician nicknamed Old Hickory, whose political style has sometimes been compared with that of current President Donald Trump. First dip, Gloria the baby hippo must have been pretty excited swimming in the deep pool at Bouval Zoo. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. 15 people in a village in southern Mexico have been killed following disputes by locals. State prosecutors in the state of Oaxaca say that bodies of 13 men and 2 women were identified as victims of the attacks over Sunday night and Monday morning in the municipality of San Mateo del Mar, east of the Pacific port of Salina Cruz. The San Mateo del Mar municipal government said in a statement that the attack was orchestrated by at least 6 armed people with the support of suspected local crime boss. In a separate statement, Oaxaca state prosecutors said the investigators are underway into what sparked the violence in the Juan Zandel del Rio, a village of Ikut's indigenous origin. Officials are still investigating whether the attackers had guns. The municipal government says the 2 women killed had been protesting against abuses by one of the suspected attackers, who described himself as a representative of Huazatlan del Rio. Peace in the Middle East has always been a big concern, and yet it appears that it may be even the people not helping the situation. Some Jewish settlements scattered across the West Bank are complicating what was supposed to be a blueprint for peace by U.S. President Donald Trump, months after he announced his plans last year.
A handful of Jewish settlements spread across hilltops in the occupied West Bank decades ago as Israel's defensive wall against Arab foes are now complicating its efforts to accommodate U.S. President Donald Trump's blueprint for peace.
It will strangle the community because eventually families here need livelihood. On the one hand, they are saying we are not evicting anybody. That's what they said in the plan I saw in the media. But once you strangle the population and they have no livelihood, they must do something.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet is set to discuss what parts of the territory to annex under the plan next month. The Trump plan foresees this state of 70% of the West Bank, enveloping 15 of some 130 settlements there. Though Washington has offered defense and access guarantees for these enclaves, they have become spare points of a settler counter-campaign.
Instead of the Trump plan, which turns us into enclaves, I will tell Trump, thanks very much for the plan, thanks very much for the great affection for the Jewish people, but we will set our own destiny. Right now, it's a plan which is not good for us. It's not good at all. It's letting go a large parts of land. We prefer to continue with the existing situation and move forward slowly until the entire land of Israel will belong to the people of Israel.
El-Kayam predicted some residents would be unable to commute to jobs through the new Palestine, would have construction permits caped, and would face a higher risk of armed attack. Despite that, a direct poll survey last week found 56.8% of settlers support the Trump plan, more than the Israeli average.
We are endeavoring to struggle to the end. No games. With all the legal tools that a democratic country has to offer, we will not create anarchy.
Israeli and U.S. officials want to be seen as keeping a door open to diplomacy. This week, U.S. officials will discuss whether to give Israel the green light for annexation moves seen by the Palestinians and many other countries as illegal land grabs.
We've been seeing dramatic images out of Bolivia with desperate residents of the country's Santa Cruz region seeking dry land after floods swept through residential areas. Video showed locals pulling one resident from the floodwaters and giving him CPR. Parents carried children on their backs as waters reached waist high. According to local reports, residents are being evacuated to a nearby market, and soldiers have been deployed to help move families as they wait for the water to recede. Local officials put the recent rainfall in this area at 100 millimeters for every square meter. No deaths have been confirmed by authorities. Snout first, Gloria, the baby hippo, took her first tentative steps into the deep pool in her enclosure at the France Bouval Zoo on Monday. Born on June 7th, the baby had already swum in a smaller interior tank where her mother, Bolinhas, helped her rise to the surface to breathe. But Monday's outing was the first in the main enclosure with its 2-meter deep pool, which is to be her new home. Gloria, named after the hippo in the DreamWorks movie Madagascar, weighed 38 kilograms when she was born after an 8-month pregnancy, her mother's first, and became the zoo's only baby hippopotamus in France. For the moment, she has been kept away from her father, Quevedo, and has spent the first 2 weeks inside. Thanks so much for joining us on The World Today. I'm Akaite Afia.